Hi, myself Sajan. Today we are going to discuss regarding the basic setup of rigging. So before we start into the rigging, we are not going into directly to the software. Let us discuss a little bit of theoretical part. What does the term rigging means? Actually, rigging is a part of Maya, where we have different subdivisions in Maya like animation, rendering, modeling, etc. In that there is a subcategory called rigging. So rigging is based on the bone setup. As we see in a human anatomy, if a person needs to walk from one place to another, what they do is like they need bones to support them from moving from one place to another. The similar manner, when we finish with the modeling part, we need to make sure, or we need to see our character, whichever our dream character is, able to walk or speak. So we need to have the setup called rigging. That's so. If you can see in a normal human body, there are around 206 bones, which will actually helps out to not only for the movement, it actually helps to protect the internal organs, etc. But we don't need that much for creation of the bone setup in Maya. We just need around 50 to 60 bones, where we are not worried about the internal organs because we are not going to show them in our modeling, or we're not going. If in case it is regarding the medical terms of showing the heart movements, where the camera has to flow through the heart and all, then we have to create that much bones. So right now we are basically going to touch another 50 to 60 bones for creating a model, for creating a character.
Okay, then let's get started. I have in my system, I do have Maya is 2009. So this is Maya. Everybody will be knowing about this thing. So before starting anything in Maya, let me just create a new project. Let me just click on File. Down you got the project. In that you got New. Since I have already created the project, I'll just click on Set, which will just link into my previous project. So I have created in my desktop actually a folder called rigging, which I'll just connect it to that. So now all set. My file will be saved in my project itself. If you can see here, there is no, in my drop down menu, there is no option called rigging. If you can see here, rigging actually comes under the subcategories of animation, which is what we are going to discuss is the option called skeleton, which will be dealing basically all the rigging stuff. If you can see here, these are the things which is dealing with the rigging stuff like joint tool, IK hand tool, IK spline, which I'll be discussing all these things. So before we start anything, let us create, because we need some shortcuts and all those things before we start. If you are starting with rigging, we need to have some shortcuts to get into it. So all the basic shortcuts, hopefully I think so people, I mean you guys will be knowing it. We click on spacebar to jump into different views and all those things. So before we start, let us create a shelf. So if you can come towards the left hand side, can you see here a triangle black color which pushes? Just click, left click on it, you can create a new shelf. Let me rename this shelf as rigging, so that it will help me out. Can you see here there's a change, a shelf has been created called rigging. So now let me just pull these things. How am I supposed to pull? Can I drag and drop it? Is it possible? No, it's not possible. You have to press Control Shift left click on your mouse so that it will jump here. Can you see here the icon has been proceeded? This things helps a lot in creating a bone setup. So let me just jump into the basic stuff. Before you start any kind of rigging, you have to use side view for your creation of your bone setup. So let me just click on skeleton. Let me go to the option box. Can you see on the right hand side there is a box kind of thing which is represents the option box for the particular option. So if you can come down to that, on my right hand side there is degree of freedom. There are three axes. The reason is we are dealing with 3D, that's why we have three axes. So it's X, Y and Z. The orientation is X, Y and Z. This just represents that the bone will follow the X axis. That's the meaning of this. This first one represents the axis. So let me just create as it is. Let me just create in a default version. Let me just create a small basic leg bone setup. So I actually got around how many bones? 5 bones. 5 bones has been created. So this is my bone setup for a leg. This is just a scenario to show you what does what we are going to do. So the bone setup is being created. Now let us see, before we start anything, we have to make sure that we rename all the things. It's very important in basically in rigging, because to finding out different bones, we are going to create more than around 50 to 60 bones in one particular character. Then it is very difficult to find one particular bone where it is. So we have to rename the bones. So let me rename the first one as, since it is my leg, so I'll name it as hip joint. You can press down arrow to jump into the bones, or you can just click, whichever you prefer, whichever is comfortable for you. We call this as knee joint. Then this one as ankle joint. Let me call this as ball joint. Then we got toe joint. So all the joints has been named. So that is very important, and make sure that we have only translations. No rotation should be there for the bones, which will be a big problem in later case. In any bones, if there is any rotation, that means there is a problem. So right now we don't have any axis or any kind of rotation values on our bones. So it's quite good right now. So now we have to make sure that the axis is also following in the same direction. For that, like we have wireframe in for modeling by pressing 4 in your keyboard, similar manner we have to get into the bone setup to find which axis it is following. So we have to press F8 in our keyboard, which is called as component mode, and we have to press the question mark on top of it, which will show us the axis. We can see here everything is following the x-axis, as I told you before. Everything is following the x-axis, and only the y-axis is projecting it in the backside, which we have a problem, which we'll resolve right now itself. We'll have to go to the rotation tool, okay, then click on the axis or the bone which is having the problem of axis, and you can just rotate. Since it is quite, we are not sure whether it will turn into exactly the the 90-degree angle. For that, what we have to do is we can go into the attributes of the rotation tool and click on the discrete rotation and make this to the value of 90 degree, so that we don't have any issues of rotating. See this, it like snaps. So it helps me to make sure that the y-axis is projecting exactly at 90-degree angle. So this is quite very important. If this is actually a manual way of doing this, there is another way also, which I will show it in coming sessions. So now the bone setup is done and our axis, and if you can see in the bottom of our toe, we have the rotation problem, but since we don't have any more connections for the bone, this bone won't be a problem in future. But still, if we want to make sure that this should be in the right manner and all, you can just make it not a problem. Done. So all my axis right now is in the same version, same way, so there won't be any problems right now. So it's done. Press F8. Back to the normal mode. So this has been done. Now let us go back to the next one, which we call it as IK handle tool. What is the full form of IK handle? Is inverse kinematics, which helps to move your hand upwards or downwards, or the leg upwards and downwards. It will help you out a lot in that manner. So when we go into the option box of IK handle, current solver is IKRP solver. What is the meaning of RP solver? That's one question. And if I click on the drop down menu, I have another one called SC solver as well. So what exactly it does is, the SC solver represents as single chain solver. That what, since I already elaborated, the IK full form is inverse kinematics single chain solver, whereas the other one, IK inverse kinematics rotate plane solver. The reason why do we have, which I'm going to explain right now. Rotate plane solver, what is the meaning of single chain solver and rotate? Let me first jump into the default section called rotate plane solver. I'll just click. Let me just create the IK handle. For creating an IK handle, you should have an in-between bone to make sure the IK handle works out. Otherwise you won't get this kind of action. For example, I just create a IK handle. You can press G for the last action, or we can just back into the IK handle. Since I told you we can create a shortcut, let me just press Ctrl Shift left click, so that comes here, so it is easy for me to jump into it. Let me just create here. So we have got IK handle, or let me just tell you, if I create here, you don't have any kind of that kind of movement. That's the reason we should have in between bone, to make sure we have that flow of movement. Okay, so let me just create another bone with a similar fashion. For that I'm just creating another bone of looks almost similar to what we just created, and please rename everything. I'm not going into again and again with the renaming part. Now I'll just change it to SC solver, which I'll make in the similar manner. Both are doing the same functionality. If you can see here, both of them are doing the same functionality. There's no difference between them, right? Now what it does is, in future we have, if you can move your leg, if you move your, keep your ankle in the same, I mean the heel in the same part, and you're sitting, you can move your knee. Very simple, right? You can move your knee. So that way, that's what is we are going to do. We have to move our knee. This knee should be moved without moving our ankle. Can you see here? This one. So what we have to do is, we'll just create a curve, which is like a later case actually. I'll just create two curves. I'll just make sure these things. So I'm going to make sure this curve will be moving our knee. So I'll just make sure this thing is done, and the same thing I'm going to do for the same, which is called as constraint, which I'll explain to you. Can you see a handle should be use of rotate plane solver? If you can see here, that's the reason. If you can click here, can you see that it can be moved? That's the reason why we need rotate plane solver for this kind of movement. So you can ask me, where can we use the single chain solver? It can be used on our bone setup for the spine, where we can use single chain solver. So that's the reason we are using rotate plane solver. So majority times we will be using rotate plane solver itself. So at the end of session for the IK handle.